Russia has never stopped evolving their drone tactics, but the latest strategy has quintupled the drone success rate on their strikes, particularly with their Shahed drones. Just what are they doing, and how can the Ukrainians respond? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is a really interesting story for a bunch of reasons, but what's notable is that according to the spokesman for the Kiev City Military Administration, he has said that recent Russian Shahed drone attacks have actually implemented a new tactic. And it's simple, but pretty devastating, right? So the Shahed comes in waves mostly at night. The Shaheds approach at low altitudes and circle within a certain zone to draw the attention of air defense systems, right? And what they say is their main objective is actually to confuse mobile groups, right? And forcing the groups to move. So what it sounds like is that the Kiev City Administration and other Ukrainian air defense assets have fixed and mobile air defenses. So we'll have fixed counter missile batteries, but those will be stuck in one spot. In order to reinforce certain corridors wherever it looks like the drones are approaching, it sounds like the Ukrainians have mobile air defense teams who can show up and reinforce certain sites. That means, though, that the Russians can exploit this, and they appear to be doing so, right? That is that the Russian forces are actually deliberately sending an initial group through certain corridors, drawing the mobile air defense systems into those corridors, and then sending a different wave of drones through the areas where the mobile defenses aren't. A very simple feint in military parlance. And this was actually used last night. We're going to talk about how this functioned. But first, of course, guys, if you want to keep this channel operating, you guys know that I don't rely on sponsors because, frankly, no one wants to sponsor a channel that does war content. I rely on you guys to keep me doing this. So every Tuesday and Thursday, I do a deep dive analysis looking at the uncensored combat footage from the front lines. The last 2 weeks, this week, we've actually done the Ukrainian Foreign Legions documentary on Operation Shovel. This is a pretty uncensored GoPro footage heavy look at a Ukrainian Foreign Legion assault operation. So if you're interested in those type of videos and supporting the channel, go over to combatvetnews.com or check the link in the description. Okay, so what is the success rate, right? It says Ukrainian intercepts 44 of 91 Russian drones in an overnight assault. This is a sharp decline, right? We've seen that typically the Ukrainians score about 90% of a 90% hit rate. So that means we're going to use 100 as the nice round number here, right? That means typically 10 out of every 100 drones penetrate. And now you're seeing 50 out of 100 drones penetrating air defenses. So this makes Russian forces literally 5 times more effective. Now, the Ukrainians have remained adaptable, but this is part of the issue, is that they're going to need time to adapt to this new tactic, and even the act of adapting to it will likely open up new tactics. Of course, this is just part of the cat and mouse game that takes place in a whole bunch of dimensions in this conflict. But what's troubling is that we're starting to see these things evolve. And one of the things we talked about is, one was the use of the drones flying at low altitudes, right? This is to fly below many conventional radar systems used to typically detect aircraft in flight. And we've seen that while Ukraine was able to adapt to this Russian strategy, it looked like the Russians actually exported it, sharing with the Iranians this new drone strategy. And it's part of the reason, I suspect, that you saw the same strategy executed by Houthi rebels when they launched a drone at Tel Aviv. So what does all this mean? Well, the troubling thing is that one of the things that's been keeping a lid on this Middle Eastern conflict right now has been the fact that these long-range strikes just actually aren't that effective, right? Iran launches these big these big volleys of ballistic missiles or drones, and U.S. and Israeli air defenses are able to pretty effectively thwart them, meaning that there's not a public outcry for revenge the way there would be if hundreds or even thousands were killed in these, right? Imagine the outrage of the Israeli public if every one of Iranian's ballistic missiles had flattened a building in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. And so you have this, and then the fear is that as you export this, you're going to see more and more effective drone strikes targeting civilian infrastructure, right? And that, I think, is one of the big fears here. Now, the Ukrainians are already working on countering these counters, namely by the use of cheap drones, interdictor drones, effectively, that will be launched once soon as the Shaheds show up on radar. And that would allow these drones to chase them down no matter what corridor they take and hunt them out of the skies. But it requires them to move fast, and the fundamental goal here is it has to be much cheaper than a Shahed. Just like, if a Shahed is $70,000, Ukraine needs to find a way to make probably about a $7,000 interdictor drone. That's a tall order, especially given the fact that Ukraine also has to manufacture it at scale. But again, it's something that we know the United States is already working on. Companies like Anduril are really committed to that sort of system. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Huge thank you to the Colonel tier members of CombatVetNews.com, like Bill Collier, Robert Colburn, Guys Marnie, Eugenia Cuesta, Crazy Gorses, Fran Zacharias, AL90, Petra Tararu, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. Couldn't do it without you. Hit that subscribe. See you over on CombatVetNews.com.